All right, boys, let's try to make this video and not get anyone upset. What is going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Yammy Noob. The title of today's video is, this is the only person that I think that should own a Ducati. Now, that's not to say that I think just this one person can own a Ducati. I'm sure there's plenty of people who own Ducatis, plenty of different types of people. But I'd love to discuss this motorcycle and the Ducati line and just kind of their brand and their bikes in particular as it relates to a couple of my thoughts about who should actually buy these bikes. Because I think what happens is sometimes we fall head over heels with a certain motorcycle, but if we actually need it to do certain things, we may want to look somewhere else. So today's video is going to be a deeper dive into who I think should actually own a Ducati, some of the pitfalls of owning a Ducati, some of the stuff that comes with these motorcycles. Now, this particular Ducati right here, this Panigale V2, this awesome sport bike, is actually a giveaway motorcycle. Yes, so if you go on yammynoob.co, you can sign up, join our community of motorcyclists. We have an awesome Discord server, which is kind of like a chat room. Everybody hangs out, has fun. I'm there every day. We hold weekly live streams, contests, all kinds of fun stuff. If you click the link below and join up, you get access to that, which I think is one of the coolest things about supporting the channel and showing your support for what we do here. We put out a daily piece of content about motorcycles. It's always high quality, always fun, and I literally have 5 people who work for me. So if you want to keep supporting them, if you don't like me, if you want to support the people who work for me and just our whole team here, it would mean a lot for me if you checked out that website. Another big shout out as well is to Eurocycle right here. They are actually the dealership that I bought this Ducati from. Now, they didn't give me this motorcycle. I wish that Eurocycle was my sweet sugar daddy, handing out Panigales to me left and right, but that's not exactly how it works. I still had to cut a check over to my guy, Chris, over there at Eurocycles. What up, Chris, if you're watching this video? And he did exchange dollars for goods, and I got this motorcycle over to me. But it would really mean a lot to me if you checked out their website as well. They have a bunch of cool bikes for sale, and they can ship all over the country, which is how I got this Panigale, because I actually don't live in Las Vegas where he lives. So without further ado, let's jump aboard the spicy Italian meatball and talk about who should own a Ducati. One thing that I love about this thing is that the switch clusters are exactly like my desert sled, which I really miss. Right now it's in the shop getting its desmodromic valves done, and so I haven't seen that bike in about a week and a half now, which is a little sad. You gotta love that V-twin in this thing, man. Gotta love it. Now, when it comes to buying a Ducati, I think a lot of people, the very first thing that they think about is the price. So Ducatis are known for being a more premium, a more expensive brand, sometimes needlessly so. But it might surprise you to learn that not all their bikes are super expensive. They actually make motorcycles that are pretty reasonably priced. And I'm thinking of something like the Monster 797, the Ducati Scramblers, even the 821. You know, they'll happily sell you a motorcycle that's under $12,000 out the door all day. So the initial purchase price on something like the Ducati, Panigale V2 even, it's like $16,500, is not prohibitively expensive. Now, what happens, however, is that these motorcycles over the long run are very expensive. And the reason I know that is because I actually own another Ducati myself. I have a Ducati Scrambler Desert Sled. It's an off-road style scrambler. I love the bike to bits and pieces. If you guys have been watching my channel for a little bit, you all know that I really love and dig the Ducati Scrambler Desert Sled. But man, I gotta tell you, like, between the parts that I've put onto it, the maintenance that I've had to do to it, there's a lot of bits here and there on that motorcycle that have been a little bit more expensive than I thought they would be. Now, I'm very fortunate in that an extra $100 here or there is not going to break the bank for me, but I know that's not the case for most people. So I think what happens for a lot of guys is they'll go to their Ducati dealership and they'll say, oh man, they got a V4S here for $23,000. If I take out a 5-year loan, that's only, $200-300 a month. I can totally afford this Ducati. Now, I don't want to make this video about personal finances, but you got to really ask yourself if you can actually afford something like a V4 if you can only afford the payments. Insurance rates on Ducatis tend to be pretty high because they're so expensive, and a lot of people do crash them, so insurance rates on these bikes do tend to run a little bit spicier than normal. It's not as bad as like your Japanese 1000cc's or 600s or MT-09s and stuff like that. MT-09 has got to be one of the most expensive bikes I've ever insured, and it has to be down to the fact that so many squids just loop them while, you know, riding down their main street of their town. That has to be the reason why that happened. But yeah, I think these bikes, if you're thinking about getting one, you got to really think about the long-term cost. So the type of person who's going to get a Ducati, in my opinion, should be someone that is comfortable with spending a little bit more over the long run of the ownership of their bike to have something that they really, really care about and they really like. Because Ducatis are incredibly emotional motorcycles. I know that's a bit of a cliche, but they are, right? They exude curb appeal. They exude status and sex and all that kind of stuff, right? They're very, very cool. So that's something I think you guys should keep in mind. The other thing I think you should keep in mind as well is that these are not really competition motorcycles. And what do I mean when I say that, right? So I'm involved in club racing here in Texas. I'm part of the CMRA here. And at a CMRA event, at a race weekend, you will see very few Ducatis, which is funny because Ducati has such a wonderful pedigree of racing and history, going to the racetracks. You know, right now they got a pretty solid GP machine going. The Desmo Sedici's been around for forever. They got a pretty awesome, you know, racing background. They're very strong in GP. But the thing is, when it comes to their street bikes that you want to turn into race bikes, right? What happens is, again, because that cost of ownership, most guys who are racing motorcycles, it kind of depends. You either have the weekend warriors who have infinite amounts of pocket money, or you have the guy who's just trying to scrape on by and have fun racing and riding his bikes. Now, I definitely have seen the occasional track day warrior, you know, going out with his Superleggera or his V4S. You definitely see those guys, but when it comes to competition, when it comes to racing a motorcycle, you will very, very rarely see Ducatis. There's one guy I know in CMRA who runs a prepped 848, which is an older platform Ducati. He's out there and he does pretty well from what I've seen, but you know, the most common motorcycles you'll see for competition are Japanese 600s and Japanese 1000s. Bar none, those are the most popular bikes. And then also Japanese ultra lightweight bikes like the Ninja 400 and the R3. Those are the most common race application motorcycles. So if you're thinking about getting a Ducati and you want to go racing, I would really think twice about a Ducati. It's going to just be exorbitantly expensive. It's going to be very difficult to race a Ducati. It's not to say that it's impossible. Someone like Kyle Wyman in Moto America is out there with his V4R, but you know, I can guarantee you his bills for his Ducati are way more expensive and complicated than a GSX-R 1000. So definitely think carefully if you're thinking about racing a Ducati. Now, if you're thinking about being a track day warrior, which is totally cool, I'm not going to dog on anyone for not going out and racing a motorcycle. It's a totally different ball game when it comes to competing with the bike. If you want to go out to your favorite racetrack, just rip a couple laps on a weekend, come back home, have a nice time, don't have anything to prove to anybody, a Ducati is a pretty cool bike to do that, honestly. I know a lot of guys who have V4s, 1299s, that kind of stuff, and they're just pretty content just being track day warriors, and they have no aspirations of racing or competing or trying to get podiums. So I think if that's your bag, a Ducati makes a lot of sense. The other point I'd like to make is that, you know, Ducatis are not really everyday kind of bikes, you know? They're not exactly motorcycles that you can just kind of bop around town and commute with and that kind of stuff. Now, I know a lot of people do that with their motorcycles, but in my humble opinion, I think there's plenty of other options other than a Ducati to get if you want to bop around town and commute. Now, I already know the guys are going to come at me with their, hell, Yami, don't you daily your Scrambler? Don't you have, you know, a Ducati to bop around town with? And to that I say, yes, I do, of course, and I think the Multistrada as well is a cool bop around town bike. The Monster's pretty cool. Ducati will happily sell you a pretty decent all-around town kind of bike, but I do feel like because of the added, you know, Ducati tax over the lifetime, there's a crazy Ducati tax for modifications on these motorcycles too. I mean, my God, a full Akrapovic system on this V2 is $5,000. That is eye-wateringly expensive for a set of pipes to put on a bike. Even the V4's full exhaust macro is like 8 or 9 grand, I think. You could literally buy a race prepped 600 for that kind of money. So it's a little hard to justify. So again, I don't think they make the best daily bikes. So if you're the kind of person who wants a motorcycle you can ride around town all the time and something that you can just bop around town and you don't want to worry about it very much, Ducati's probably not the best brand for you. I think that makes a pretty strong case for itself when you consider the service intervals for these motorcycles and that kind of stuff. I mean, I think about something like my KTM 250 SXF. I've got a little dirt bike in case you guys didn't know. That bike is measured on hours of usage, not miles, in case you guys are unfamiliar with a competition off-road machine. So instead of mileage, all it has is just a little hour counter on the engine, and you just have to keep track of what it's doing based on the hours. And Ducatis are definitely not like that. They don't have hour counters on them, but they are still finicky when it comes to service and maintenance and all this stuff, and you got to be sure that you're on top of it. It's a little bit extra work to take care of these things. Now, a brand spanking new bike is a brand spanking new bike. It's not going to be super difficult to take care of one, but just keep that in mind if you're thinking about dailying your Ducati. I think as well too, the elephant in the room for Ducati ownership, and something a lot of people don't talk about because I think they're almost embarrassed by this, which I think is kind of silly because to me it's kind of the whole point of owning such an exotic and cool bike is that, you know, they are kind of a flex machine, and that's the point. I kind of think that Ducatis should retain their status and should be reserved as these bikes that you flex on others with. They're kind of fun in that way, you know? I think that if you want a bike that just does everything super well, you would go look at a Japanese motorcycle. But if you want a bike that has a little bit of a different something to it, you know, a little bit of curb appeal, a little something a little different about it, I think that's why we look at these kind of more limited production run Italian exotica kind of bikes. That they make a lot of sense. This is a great bike, man. Works so well. I think another thing that you have to reckon with if you're thinking about getting a Ducati is that although they try to position themselves as the, you know, absolute apex predator of performance and just these incredible machines, I mean, it is a bit of a bummer, but that Revzilla video that everyone never stops adding me at about and talking to me about the K5, you know, a Japanese 1000, they're so ridiculously capable nowadays that something like this V2 would just be absolutely embarrassed at the track at. But you have to also remember that that is really down to the rider. I think a lot of people think that they're going to buy a GSX-R 1000 and then suddenly rip around as fast as anybody on a V4S. It does not work that way. Motorcycles are very different than cars, for example, where you buy a fast car and you typically will go fast on a racetrack and probably beat out lap times. It is so dependent on the rider. It is so dependent on the skill set of the rider as well. You can't expect to jump on a Japanese 1000 and rip out super fast lap times compared to an expert rider on a Ducati. So keep that in mind if you are dogging on Ducatis online, or if you are making comments about them being like, oh, they're so slow, they're so crap compared to, you know, Japanese bikes. It really depends on the rider, man. It really depends on, you know, if you are a capable rider and if you are able to extract performance out of your machine, because if you're not, then you're going to be way slower on that Japanese bike. So guys, those are my opinions on who I think should actually own a Ducati, and just some things to think about when you are considering Ducati ownership. These are very premium and expensive bikes, and I don't think they're for everyone, but man, if you got the pocketbook for it, life is short. Try one out. They're a ton of fun. I love mine that I own, and I've been really enjoying this V2 that I've got in the shop right now too. So if you're interested in winning this one for free, one of you guys could get this Panigale in your garage. Hit that link below. Check out yaminoob.co and find out how you can get entered to win and join our amazing community of motorcyclists online. Catch you guys in the next one. See you later. Hey, thanks for watching the video. Why don't you click this one right over here and you can keep watching some more of your sweet Papa Yam. Maybe this one will have fun memes in it. Maybe it'll be interesting. Maybe I crash a motorcycle. Who can say? Maybe you should click and find out.